On Iowa's best football game of the season, they put together their best drive of the season. We take a look back at what we saw against Washington, plus talk with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. All today, Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts, and you can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on the audio side, 5-star reviews helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Opening things up here with another look back at the win against Washington. As we do each and every Sunday, we take another peek at the game film, the TV film, and we watch back at what we saw in this one. A busy week coming up this week as we get ready to turn the page and get ready for Michigan State, a road trip out there. We'll be doing a crossover edition with Matt from Locked On Spartans. Always an entertaining guy, always a good conversation with Matt. Looking forward to that. Biz is going to stop by this week. We will hear from him and a whole lot more Hawkeye content as we're starting to hit that crossroads now. Got football season upon us, but there is basketball right around the corner, and we will get into plenty of that, including a little recruiting talk coming up here at the end of the program. But let's start first here as Iowa gets the big victory against Washington 40-16. Watching the game, we talked about a lot of kind of the big note topics in the Instant Reaction podcast, and I'm mentioning a couple of different things. First, when you look at this football game, what Iowa was able to do and get the victory is the way that the defense really clamped down. And one of the biggest components of that was the way that we saw some physicality starting to be implemented. But more than anything, it was the defensive line that really got going. And that defensive line that has struggled getting to the quarterback this year. We've talked about the inability of some of the guys getting there. Now, I understand teams get the ball out quick, and you're not going to see the same number of sacks maybe that you've seen in the past. But boy, up front, we saw getting the quarterback on the 2-point conversion attempt. It was great to see Deontay Craig getting there. We talked about Max Llewellyn, what he was able to do along with Brian Allen, those guys coming off the edge. But one guy that probably we didn't mention enough, and he is honored on Monday with all Big Ten honors, was Aaron Graves. Taking a look at his final stat line, even more eye-opening than what it seemed, and he was dominating that football game at times. 6 total pressures. He also has 3 quarterback hurries to go along with the 2 sacks that he had in the game, 2 forced fumbles along with a batted ball. Just a dominating performance out of Aaron Graves. And we've talked a lot about Y.A. Black, what he does in the middle of this defense, just how good he is of really covering everything up, occupying space, occupying multiple blockers, and how important that is to the Iowa scheme. Aaron Graves, though, maybe has been underappreciated, and certainly after he had that big performance in week 1, just what a good job he is doing. And that's one of the guys we wondered in the offseason, was the light bulb going to come on for Aaron Graves? Certainly appears that is the case up front. Also coming up later in the week, we will take a look back at the numbers from Pro Football Focus and see if they match up with what we saw in the football game. But I want to talk about this, and it was, I believe, the best drive of the season for Iowa football. It was their first scoring drive of the day after they get the field goal blocked by Y.A. Black, hold them off the scoreboard, and get the football back at the 20-yard line. And after a 3-and-out on the first possession of the football game for the Hawkeyes, they got the ball first. And you could already hear the boo birds. There were some rumblings in Kinnick Stadium. That was definitely a big component to the football game that you heard in the early moments. But they come out and play the style of football that Iowa needs to do. They ran the football, and on the plays, it was just one passing play. The rest were all runs, but it wasn't just running the football. It wasn't just inside zone, outside zone. Let's see what happens. You can see the full implementation of this ground game and what it can be in under Tim Lester and why it's different than what we've seen in the past. So let's start first, the first play. Very simple. It's a run for Caleb Johnson for 11. But to start, you saw jet sweep motion. Guy in the left side comes across the formation, brings some eyes and brings an extra body with them, opening up a little bit of a hole there. Offensive line was great, by the way, in this drive as they open it up and he gets 11 yards on the first down play. They come right back and they do a huge component to what this offense is. And we've seen some monster runs from Caleb Johnson with the pitch play. It's a pitch play that I remember Minnesota a couple years back at Kinnick Stadium. Seemed like they ran it 50 times against the Hawks. And what it does, it gives that ability for your running back to get it in space a little bit more. It's not the old toss play where you're tossing it way out wide and student body right. That's not what this is. This is an inside toss play, trying to find that seam. And Caleb Johnson, with his vision, has been so good at this play. It's a tight formation, 2 tight ends in the game, also 2 wide receivers, but they are lined up tight on the right side of the formation. Now, this is also the play that was nearly a fumble on Caleb Johnson. The call, though, stands as called on the field, no fumble, and Iowa keeps the football. The only pass on the play then came right after that. They spread it out a little bit more. 3 wide receivers were in on the play, and as that wide receiver spread everybody out a little bit further, Luke Lachey was open in the middle of the field, hit him just right up the middle for a big one. And that was something you saw from Cade McNamara in this football game, is he utilized the middle of the field. 8 of his 5 completions went for first downs. That was obviously huge. That's what you're looking for, obviously, in the passing game. And in the past, we've seen Iowa just be so scared to even try anything in the middle of the field. That was not the case on Saturday against Washington. After the first down pass to Lachey, that's when we saw the Caden Weegan play, where Weegan comes off the end around play to him. He gets up the right side and gets another 10 yards. And we're talking about these big chunk plays for the Iowa offense on first down. Talked about this again, instant reaction. That's why you want to be with us right after the football games, that they average nearly 10 yards per first down. That's a winning number for Iowa football. First down, Caleb Johnson goes for 7. Second down and 3, 2 more yards. So it's 3rd and 1. What have we seen short yardage situations over the last couple of years, and really feels like for a decade plus? How much they have struggled on those 3rd and 1 situations, 3rd and short situations, even 4th and short if they don't have a guy that can do the quarterback sneak. And what do we see here? They run the ball. They get 4, but they did it quickly. They did it with tempo. I absolutely love that. And something that I missed in the first viewing of the game, they were up. 40-second play clock. They were up, snapping the ball with 28 seconds still on the play clock. Not waiting for the defense to get set, not looking over at the side. No, none of that. Get up there, call the play, give the ball to Caleb Johnson, and get the first down. Absolutely beautiful, going quick tempo. Right after that, Caleb Johnson gets a breather. Kamari Moulton comes into the game. They show that same jet motion look that they used a little bit earlier in the game, brought 2 defenders over with it, and that led to Kamari Moulton picking up 15 and setting up 1st and goal from the 6-yard line. Now, instead of putting Brendan Sullivan in the game at the 6-yard line, as we see in the past, McNamara stays out there. Caleb Johnson comes back into the game, and he darts in the end zone, 6-yard touchdown, and I was on the board, 7-0. A beautiful drive. It was a whole lot of running, but running in different ways. And that's what this Iowa offense is under Tim Lester and what it can continue to be going forward. We go forward here with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic, our weekly conversation with Doc. Not only we talk Iowa football with him, also he was in Nashville last week for the big SEC Big Ten meetings. What does it mean for Iowa? What does it mean for the CyHawk rivalry game? If we do see a scheduling alliance with the SEC and the Big Ten, does that mean CyHawk goes away? We'll talk about that and more coming up here. Iowa football talk with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Stay right there as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a small business owner, finding people to fill those roles can be incredibly difficult to find. Finding people that just not know what's going on can help you for your small business. That's why you have to find LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. As a small business owner, you know you're wearing so many hats, you're doing so many different things, and LinkedIn knows this as well. That's why they give you the resources to make these hires. They're always trying to find ways to make the process even easier, including a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process quicker and easier. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We continue talking Hawkeyes with Scott Dochterman from The Athletic.
Scott Dochterman in here. He covers the Big Ten. He covers college football for The Athletic, and he joins us. Doc, Trent, and Ken, thank you as always for joining us on this holiday Monday. I guess where I want to start with you, and Trent and I have not brought this up yet, but a milestone for Kirk Ferentz. And, it's really not lost on me just, how impactful he's been on just so many kids' lives over his tenure here in the state of Iowa. Not all of them. I mean, there's always going to be some, personality conflicts or whatever, but boy, the ones that went through the program, that made it through the program, just their love and their compassion and what their head football coach meant to them in their life development was on full display after that game on Saturday, Doc.
Yeah, that's true. And that's something that does get lost when we start looking at wins and losses and whether or not that he should start this quarterback or change this scheme or whatever. But you don't win 200 games without being a good coach. And you don't have that many players in the NFL or have successful lives without being able to be a good leader. And that's what he is. And when you talk to, you're right. There are some who won't say that. We saw that play out a few years ago. But for the most part, and the majority, yep. I would say the super majority of players that have played for him swear by him. And it's because he's got a standard. He lives to it. But he also is so personable at a human level. And that, we see the tears. He reminds me of Vermeil that way.
Yeah.
That I think it's really something that resonates with the players, just how much he is that way, how much he cares about them. And it's not just football. So I think, there's a lot to say there, but, it's something that I've recognized. I hope other people do. I know enough people don't, but it's really impactful in the way he's been as a person as well as a football coach.
And with 6 games remaining, he can win them all and pass Woody Hayes for the most wins in Big Ten history if they run the table. Still a lot of work to be done before we get to that point. Let's take a peek back at what we saw at Kinnick Stadium. A complete effort. Yeah, it wasn't pretty in the box score. Those first 2 drives by Washington looked like Iowa was in for one, but Phil Parker definitely ratcheted it up. Let's go right there. What did you see out of the Iowa defense as they were finally able to slow down that Washington defense that for their first 2 drives did whatever they wanted?
It reminded me a lot, Trent, of some of the other drives we've seen from Iowa over the years. Not as much in the last couple, but over the years where Iowa, a lot of times when a team had a decent script, would really kind of move up and down the field on that first drive, and then they kind of figure it out and the script changes, and then the team struggle to adapt, and Iowa does a really good job of it. It was something like that because Washington does have really good receivers, has a quarterback that's as old as I am, who's been in the game for a long time, and Will Rogers, who's very accomplished. So they knew kind of where they wanted to attack right away, and then they did that in a decent fashion early, and then Iowa kind of figured it out. I don't know that it was they did a whole lot different other than blitzing. I think they did attack more throughout the second half, but overall, I think it was just a really Iowa just really played resilient defense And maybe it wasn't as great of an effort as they played, say, against Minnesota in the second half or something. But I think it was an important one because they needed to figure it out, and they did. And I think that was really impressive.
Yeah, it was pressure off the edge, Doc, that kind of caught my eye. Something we're used to, Black coming in the middle or Graves in the middle. They've both had their moments this year. Black's had more, but Graves was really good this week. But it was, it was Herkett or it was Llewellyn, even Deontay Craig when he was in there, getting some pressure off the edge, and that hasn't been the case at all. Certainly it hasn't been the case this year opposed to previous years, but it was on Saturday.
Yeah, that was a real important part because that was my looking at this team. What's the issue, the hidden issue? And I think it was pass rush, and certainly off the edge was where it counted. But they did some blitzing. And I think it was really important that the blitzing was impactful. It didn't always register in a sack, but I saw Nick Jackson, for instance, blazing in through there, which altered the protection, which enabled Aaron Graves to force a fumble, which enabled Max Llewellyn to recover it. I mean, there were a lot of those types of plays that I think was really important. And I'm starting to really like Max Llewellyn. I think he's probably their best pure pass rusher. Brian Allen being right there. I think they might be. We saw this. It's been a few years now, but it's like about. I'm going back ways now. I guess 15 years or so. But where we saw when Brian Madison and Kenny Webema were the defensive end combination, and they were good, but you could see behind them with Adrian Claiborne and Christian Ballard that they were like, okay, these guys are different. And I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that Brian Allen and Max Llewellyn are in that category, but you could see that they maybe have better pass rush skills. Maybe they're not quite as developed, as full service defensive ends, but I really like what they're bringing to this team.
Yeah, both those guys definitely have some juice. The play design on the touchdown pass as the streak ended. Cade McNamara touchdown passes against Power 4. They put the graphic up on the screen, talked about it a lot last week. It finally ended, but the play design there, it's something that we just haven't seen recently from Iowa. You flood out one side, sneaking out the backside as your best athlete in Caleb Johnson. You get it to him, and he beats a linebacker in space. It's simple, yet it's something we just haven't seen. As we hit the halfway mark, where are you with Tim Lester and maybe still what can come in that passing offense?
I really like the way he's developed this offense because he's used Iowa's strengths in a way that really, I would say, fashions them forward, and that's the running game, especially because Iowa had this element. It just didn't tap into it. It was just too rigid in the past, and they were injured. I'll give them that too last year, up front, but they were just too rigid in the way that they ran the ball with outside zone or stretch and then inside zone. Never really accomplished the midside zone, and that really has taken Caleb Johnson from being a talented player with potential to being one of the best players in the country at his position, and an offensive line really needing that match there. I think in the passing game, you're seeing growth. Each and every game, they're getting a little bit better in certain ways. Didn't show up as much against Ohio State because of the elite part of that opponent, but I think overall that they're making strides. Are they good enough? Or no, they're not good enough, but they look a lot better than they did last year. And I think they look a lot better than they did 3 or 4 weeks ago. So that's what you want. It's going to take time, but overall, I think Lester, other than getting a few too cute on the goal line against Iowa State, I would give him a very strong grade, an A for what he's been able to do, considering the players he has and what he had to work with going into this year.
Yeah, good to see Seth Anderson get involved and Dalen Howard, his first touchdown catch. I want to go back to the defense for just a second because I made a note, Doc, during the game. I thought it was Wampka's best game of the year. Did you see it that way?
Yeah, I did. I think it was very observant. I mean, he was all over the place. He was really aggressive. I mean, you really saw a passion there, something that, he wanted to send a message, and he did it throughout from on special teams. He did it, as a defensive back. He did it all game long, and that's what you want to see. And I think that's probably, something that, maybe some of the reporters will get tomorrow is, if he's around, or maybe from Kirk or something else. But you just wonder if there was a fire lit into him, and, that, hey, this is your opportunity. You're really going to have to take this. And because Cohen Entringer has played well too, and they've been trading some series, and as and Xavier has all the talent in the world. We know it, but you want to see more from it. And I think this was an opportunity to see more. And he showcased it that, all right, he's got the goods. And if he can do that and other players can do that, then this defense will get much better very quickly.
Another guy I thought had his best game was Jeremiah Pittman. We've talked about developing depth and definitely have at the defensive end position. You feel good about that. Needed at the defensive tackle position. Got to see a couple of those other young guys out there a little bit at the end. Hubert Gaffney. Also saw Nestor out there on the field. We saw Lutmer making a play there late in the football game. So I didn't think going into this one, we're going to be seeing the deep reserves in there against Washington, but just shows you credit for this Iowa team and the depth. We don't know a lot of the names yet, but it feels like the reserves, they're coming here for Iowa football defensively.
Yeah, there's some that I think you look at what the future holds, and you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself because it's still half the season left, and you don't want to wish away football season for anything. But
that's for sure.
But I do think you look at the bright spots, which they made another change at cornerback. They went back to TJ Hall, and he got beat on a pass, but you know what? That was a great pass, and that was a great receiver. Sometimes it just happens that way. But I think overall he played well. He's got experience. Deshaun Lee's got experience. Nestor got in there. That means that all three are probably going to see a lot of action next year. Lutmer they moved to a dime package that they started at Ohio State, and then I think they played either 7 or 9 snaps out of it the other day. And so I think that's another step in the right direction for this offense or this defense. I'm sorry. And I think, getting those guys out there, Wampa, seeing him, and Entringer and Lutmer. I mean, I think there's some real talent in that secondary. And I definitely believe that and know that at the younger level at linebacker, they may not get the starts next year, but in 2 years, everybody's going to know who they are. They're top level, no question.
Special teams, another good day. Dakin, Drew Stevens, perfect again on his day. Weegan is an inch away from breaking one. It seems like it's going to happen at any time. Another really good day for special teams, Doc.
Yeah, I would expect that to happen on Saturday because it seems to always happen. And the last 2 times, anyway, that they've played Michigan State, they've had punt returns, Charlie Jones and Cooper DeJean. So I imagine that's when Cade McNamara will get his official touchdown not called back. It was really good for them. I mean, you saw a good day from Drew Stevens. I thought Reese Dakin played really well. And of course, their former punter had a tremendous day yesterday, one of the best in Bears history, But, the return game has been good too. So overall, I mean, they've got to be happy with the way they've performed there. They've got, they had a couple of slip ups earlier in the year and they've made progress, which they always do. So people that freak out at game 3 for what they do or don't do, usually Iowa gets better, as long as the players stay healthy. And I think we saw that in every facet 2 days ago.
Doc, a big week last week, as we talked about in our preview with you a week ago, and it was about the meetings with the SEC and the Big Ten. Give us a takeaway above the fold, what we should know coming out of those meetings for Big Ten Hawkeye fans that are out there.
PB.
They did a lot of talking. I would say that, and I'm trying to figure out which area makes the most sense for people to digest here. And I think, that they are going to work together when it comes to scheduling. What does that mean for games like Iowa State or Washington State, the Civil War in Oregon or some of the others in the SEC? That remains to be seen. I do think there's a desire for the league to work together in all kinds of facets, whether that's NIL or to work together. You can't really discuss the figures, and then to do some other things. But the NCAA is going to implode at some point, and the Big Ten and SEC are really looking at ways for the next level of governance. And I think so. A lot of this is, in the weeds. It's kind of boring, but it's really important. And so, I guess we'll just focus, on a show like this that, there may be the opportunity sometime for Iowa to play an SEC game in football. And what does that mean for the CyHawk? We don't really know. I mean, they have a contract in place, but I don't think that it's going to be a mandate. I think it's just going to be, let's do this as often as we can. So maybe there's one year where, who knows, maybe Iowa will play Mizzou and St. Louis to kick off the season, and that'll be an 11th game, one in a 5-year period. That's something I could see coming out of what we saw the other day.
That'd be awesome if that ever happened. Close for both schools. Doc, what do you got coming up this week at the Athletic?
Yeah, this is a midpoint of the season, so we've got all kinds of midpoints. We got our Big Ten grades tomorrow. We have commentator cruise stories at the midpoint. I'm writing about Red Grange because the 100th anniversary of the greatest game in college sports history is coming up. I'm going to Purdue and Indiana this week for games. It's Oregon and Nebraska respectively, and college football playoff. I mean, it's just a really insane, crazy, busy week, but it's fun. It's been a football season. Great weather. Can't complain.
Absolutely. Scott Dochterman from The Athletic.
Doc, great stuff as always from him. Appreciate Scott Dochterman joining us as we talk some Iowa football and a little look at the SEC Big Ten meetings from last week. We continue. Iowa gets a big commitment for the hardwood and loses a big commitment on the football field. We'll talk about that as we continue. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite teams to watch them play even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff, so you're only going to get incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different tickets. I've used the Game Time app here recently. You can pick up tickets for the big game at Kinnick Stadium coming up here in a couple of weeks as they return home after the road trip to Michigan State. And maybe you're heading out to Spartan Stadium. They got you covered there as well. You can do it with their all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront. No more surprise fees at checkout. Maybe you've never been to Spartan Stadium. Well, you're going to get a panoramic view from your seat right there in the app before you buy. Know exactly what it's going to look like when you get inside the stadium. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Trent Condon back with you one final time here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So we mentioned a little bit about the recruiting side of things. LaShawn Williams, by the way, departing the University of Iowa. That announcement came down last week, hearing from a number of Big Ten and SEC programs already. He's likely going to find himself a very good home. But big news from the hardwood as Iowa picks up a commitment from a 4-star center from Alaska. Layla Hays has made her commitment to Iowa and showed up at Kinnick Stadium over the weekend wearing an "I'm Home, Go Hawks" t-shirt. I love that. The number 2 post player in the country, a top 100 player, and a 4-star from ESPN. Chose the Hawkeyes, had offers from North Carolina, Duke, Gonzaga, Illinois, Indiana, Washington, Nebraska. Said that her top school was Iowa. And I mentioned that to HawkeyeReport.com. So great stuff there. Continuing the big commitments from the left coast. Of course, Ava Hayden, who we'll get to see coming up this season with the Hawkeyes, and another one on that line. Top 100 player, moves pretty well out there, 6'4". Love the frame. And definitely something to be excited on. But there was the other side of the equation. And Iowa loses a commitment from Cam Herron, a 3-star prospect that had been with the Hawkeyes, committed for quite a while. Well, he took a visit to Notre Dame and then committed to Notre Dame. Not a big surprise when you see that happen. Kirk Ferentz talks about being married versus just dating. And though it looked like they felt very secure in his commitment, didn't have a ton of monster offers by any means, but he's an Indiana kid. Notre Dame comes calling. It stings. That's a stinger, no doubt. Iowa still is not in a spot where they can afford to be losing guys like this, guys that they identify early on, that they pick out. It's a sting. What are you going to do? Nothing. Iowa football will continue. Iowa football will go on, but that one definitely kind of tough to swallow when you identify a guy like that, get his commitment, feel really good about it, guy that was going to help on the interior of the offensive line, and then you lose them to Notre Dame. Well, that will do it for the recruiting update here. We got a lot more updates coming your way. We'll take one final look back at Washington, get the numbers from Pro Football Focus, a big preview of Michigan State with Matt Sheehan from Locked On Spartans. Looking forward to that. Matt's always a fun guy to talk football with, talk sports with in general. That's coming up later in the week. Biz will return. We'll get ready for the week with him and a whole lot more. We got you covered each and every day. Locked On Hawkeyes, your team every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network, and not just Locked On Hawkeyes. We got you covered, whatever your favorite team may be. You can also check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig Sheehan does the greatest job you're going to find in putting the Big Ten first. When everyone else is overlooking it, talking about the SEC all the time, Craig's got you covered. Find Locked On College on Big Ten, on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for being with us here today, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you then. Go Hawks.